12:30. So I would like to officially call to order the Winston-Salem Forsyth County Utilities Commission May the 8th meeting together. So that being said, roll call.
Chair Wesley Curtis.
Present.
Vice Chair Chris Parker.
Present.
Commissioner Simpson Brown.
Present.
Commissioner Harold Eustache. Commissioner Tom Griffin.
Here.
Commissioner Yvonne Hines. Commissioner Hugh Jernigan. Commissioner Dwayne Long.
Here.
Commissioner Calvin McRae.
Present.
Commissioner Charles Wilson.
Present.
Commissioner Alan Younger.
All right, so we don't have Alan. Okay.
He did email me this morning, so I expect him to be on.
All right, well, good. Well, again, I said welcome to everyone, and we've got a lot on our agenda to cover today. And we do have several guests with us because we do have a public hearing. So we'll first start off, welcome and announcements.
Yep.
Yes, please.
Yes. Good afternoon. Just go ahead and advance my slides real quick. Get started. I do have a couple of introductions to make. We have Shanita Wright, who is sitting behind me, and she is the central warehouse manager. And she's a mentee of Kenny Atkins, who's our field operations manager. And so she's just sitting in today and kind of listen to the discussion and see what it's all about.
You're welcome.
Yeah, glad to have her. Chantel McClam, who's our purchasing director, has been promoted to neighborhood services director. So this is her last meeting with us. I shouldn't be with this.
No, do we get to vote on that?
I know. So we should have a new purchasing director hopefully soon. So maybe by the next meeting that I will introduce. And then not new faces, you've seen them lately, but Ref Tellis, Volcar, and Ford Mariotti. Moriarty, okay, thank you. So they're here to talk about the system development fee report and study that they did. Okay. Let's see, currently we have 85 departmental vacancies, so we're just sitting right there in the 80s as we have for several months.
Call from
I'm gonna mute you, Tom. So we have May 7th through the 13th is AWWA Drinking Water Week, and AWWA stands for American Water Works Association. The other thing I wanted to just update you on is a 65 West pump station update. So for those of you that remember, in January of 2022, it was the night of the Wilson Weaver fire, January 31st. There was some system pressure and supply issues that we needed to fight the fire for the Wilson Weaver fire. Can't 100% say that it was all tied together, but it is a coincidence. At that same night, we had a huge event at our 65 West pump station, and I'll just show you some pictures here. We had a failure in one of our valves, and it blew out the lines, and of course it flooded the station. Major damage. You can see the water coming out of the building there. It pretty much did a lot of damage to the floor. You see how it settled. And there's two more pictures here. So we did file an insurance claim on that, and that's why I'm bringing it back up. We did get, we are going to receive some funds from insurance. You know, we talked about claims last week, or not last week, but at our last meeting. And we're getting roughly $799,000 back from insurance to help pay the cost for this. Of course, the estimated damage is more around the lines of 1.5 million, but at least we're getting some back from insurance.
Let me add to that. My understanding is we're getting a check for the $799 like right now. We also anticipate getting, I think 95%. We're going to get another check.
Oh, are we? Okay.
For the rest of it.
Okay.
Not 100%, but let's say 95%.
Okay.
So that it's kind of like the down payment, get us up to speed now, and then every invoice after this, we'll submit it for reimbursement. So we will be getting.
That's good. Okay, I misunderstood that. So that's good.
That's a lot.
Yeah, Courtney, that's correct. This is Bill. We're
we're getting reimbursed the full amount for the repair to the station minus $90,000, which the 90,000 represents the amount associated with the failure underneath the base slab. And they're also going to reimburse us for the engineering fees associated with the project.
Oh, good.
So our insurance policy then is not, doesn't have a typical deductible, is that across the board generally?
There is a deductible, because I saw in the letter it was 25,000, but I don't know if that's, yeah.
But I think I just heard somebody say we're gonna get real close to 100%.
I think the total value of engineering and construction, like Bill said, was 1.6, and they're gonna reimburse us for everything minus 90 grand, so it'll be a large majority of it.
Okay. Just a couple of photos from the Earth Day event that we had in April. And there was a good turnout at this event.
A lot of questions from young people about what we do.
We told every single person about can the grease and don't wipe some ice. Couldn't get past that.
All right.
Yeah, and so there, it looked like a lot of people. We have a prize wheel, like you can't see it in those pictures. Oh, you can up in the top,
Yeah.
top left or right. But I think that draws a lot of attention.
Oh, really? What kind of prizes you give?
Our promo items like the pen, the magnetic clip, the tape measure, and then Michael Gear in there in the bottom center, and Joel's in the other green shirt to the left. They're with our industrial wastewater control group, and they have their own can of grease. Lots of things. Towels. Yeah, love it.
And a glass.
And a glass of water. Well,
And Ricky was also there, which was great.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you for putting that on. That's great.
And others.
yeah, sorry, that's blocking your view.
5,000 people,
Blocking your view there. Yeah, good event.
even though it was inside.
That's right. Okay, so next on the agenda is the system development fees presentation. So I'll turn it over to Will and let him go through that before you open up the public hearing. Okay.
Thanks so much for having me today. It's good to see all of you again, or many of you again, and some new faces as well. Going to give just a streamlined presentation of our system development fee study that we've been working with Winston-Salem Forsyth County Utilities over the last several months. So system development fees are one-time fees that are assessed to new connections to the water and sewer system. The intent of these fees is to recover the investment in the system, the capacity costs related to being able to serve new customers. They are prescribed and sort of governed and overseen by this Chapter 162A, Article 8 of the North Carolina General Statutes. And one of those requirements is that every 5 years, you've got to do an update of the study by a qualified firm or preparer. And that's what we've done this year. This was an update to the fees that we did about 5 years ago. So in terms of the steps that you got to take to implement system development fees, first we performed an analysis, and there's a copy of the written analysis up here at the front if you don't already have one. The analysis has to then be posted on the website, and there's a comment period that lasts about 45 days. So this was posted on March 24th, 45 days ago. And today we're here as part of a public hearing to consider those written comments. As of May 5th, when this presentation was received, there were 4 comments. I think that they've all been printed out up here, so I'm not going to read them. But actually, they're all related to implementation considerations and not necessarily methodology questions or comments. So I'm going to defer on these particular comments to the commission. Again, they're implementation considerations, not necessarily pertaining to the methodology. And then the public hearing, of course, is today, and then I believe the plan is to adopt fees or decide in June. So there's 3 methodologies for calculating system development fees. And again, I'm going to sort of speed through just a couple of slides that give a high-level overview. There's a capacity buy-in approach, which has that check mark there. This is the approach that we use to calculate the fees for this study. This is really focused on this methodology is appropriate when there's capacity in the existing system. There's enough to serve new customers. There's not big projects or upgrades that are needed. This is really, a deep dive into our existing facilities and the capacity that's available to serve new customers. The incremental and marginal cost, that's more of a forward-looking fee. So the way I like to think about it is the capacity buy-in, that looks at assets that are already in the ground. The incremental approach is a forward-looking fee that looks at future projects that might be needed to serve new customers. If there's a capacity issue, if you don't have capacity to serve new customers, that's a situation where you use the incremental or the marginal cost approach. And then there are certain situations where a combined approach, which is a hybrid of the two, makes sense. But again, we've used the capacity buy-in, which really is just a look at what assets are in the ground and in place to serve new customers. So how exactly did we calculate these fees? Here's just a quick overview of how it's done. There's a printed out copy of the report if you need one up here. Very exciting stuff, I can promise you. But basically what we've done, again, we determined that we needed the capacity buy-in approach. From there, we identify the cost of facilities. So what we've done is we've brought those assets to current dollars. So what we've done is replacement cost new, less depreciation. Recognize that many of our assets have been in service for a long time, and so we've adjusted for that. From there, we make other considerations and adjustments, things like removing contributed capital. There's a debt principal credit that we do to make adjustments to sort of get it down to this net asset value that's eligible for the system development fee calculation. From there, we define and derive. We define a residential service unit. We work, to identify what that level would be, and then we've calculated a fee per residential service unit. And then the final step is establishing this equivalency or conversion table for the fees. And for Winston-Salem, these fees are scaled by meter size. So you'll see that in just a second. The tables are all, meter size. And then I've just got 2 slides on the fees that we've calculated. So you can see here, we've got the fees for each meter size. We've got the current fee there on the left, what we've calculated as sort of the maximum cost justified fee there, in the middle, and then the dollar difference, as well as a percent difference to help provide scale. As you can see on water, a relatively minor increase, about 2.7%. And since these fees are scaled proportionally by meter size, though the dollar values are a little bit different, you can see the percent change is consistent through all of these charges. Okay. And then the last slide for me is these are the sewer fees. A little bigger jump on the sewer side, about 27%, which is about $615 for the smallest meter size. But again, the fees are scaled, so it's all the same percent increase for each of the size. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Ricky, I think, or Courtney.
Open up.
Yeah.
Okay. So let me ask a quick question. So what's our largest? What size meters get used the most?
Yeah, the most. Yeah, it's going to be the smallest.
And that's the 5 or 3.
The 5/8.
Okay.
Those are residential
Yeah.
sites.
Basically for single family.
What percentage of that of the overall would you say that is?
How much is the majority of our customers are residential. And I don't have that number off the top of my head, but
We can
talking over,
Yeah.
but the majority. So I guess if
All
there-
right, so it's all.
Yeah.
So at this point, I guess we're at the point of our agenda where we will open the meeting up for a public hearing regarding the system development fees. And where's the list? Do I have a list of? Where's my list? Okay, here. grab my list and we'll go down the list in the order to sign in. We do have some guests that did sign in, thank you. All right, so starting down the list, I'm going to start off with I said John Louder. That's right. John?
Thank you.
Sorry, thank you. Sorry.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the Commission. My name is John Louder. I'm the president of the Triad Real Estate and Building Industry Coalition. We represent the real estate and building industry. Some of our members include the Home Builders Association of Winston-Salem, the Greensboro Builders Association, and the Piedmont Triad Association, all who have reached out with some concerns about the proposed fee increases. But before I get into that, I want to first thank the staff for being proactive and reaching out to us and engaging us in conversations well ahead of time. So we've had the opportunity to look at these and what I can tell you is that we recognize that they have many of the same pressures that the private sector does when it comes to labor and costs and material costs. Where we're going to have a fundamental difference is on how to pay for it and how much to pay. So just want to get that out ahead of time. So our standpoint is this: system development fees are a tax on one sector, and that's the new development sector. There are more cost-efficient ways to pay for this instead of burdening the new development. So for instance, if you were to issue a bond, typically the rates on a bond are going to be lower than what the private sector is going to pay for financing any kind of project. As you mentioned, the vast majority are going to be in the residential sector, or a good majority. When you look at the cost for that are proposed, that's roughly what, $700 ish per residence, six something. And if you were to factor in the financing costs when somebody goes to buy a home, you build that in and you factor in the cost for them to pay for it, it really comes out to more like $900, close to $1,000. And when you add that cost, you're eliminating a certain number of folks who can qualify for that purchase. So about 7-8 years ago, National Home Association of Home Builders did a study showing how many people in each market would be precluded from buying if you added $1,000 to the cost. In Winston-Salem, that'd be about 480 people who could no longer afford to buy a home if you add $1,000 to the cost. So although $900 in the grand scheme of things doesn't sound like a lot, that has a significant impact on the community, and it further puts pressure on affordable housing. I'll pause for a minute and say, I have to say, I'm a member of the Affordable Housing Coalition here in Winston-Salem, and I am not here on their behalf. Anything I say has nothing to do with them. So I just want to get that out there. So another concern that we have is when you do we saw the scaling, the linear scaling, and when you look at the average household size, as you get larger, so a typical multifamily development is going to have an 8-inch meter, but they don't use the same amount of water as a single family home or sewer. They have smaller households in general. So as you scale up, it's not a linear progression as you scale up in size. So that's another concern we have. There's this common misconception that developers are paying this cost. They are not. The fees and taxes, they are just like any other input into construction or development. They get passed along to the end consumer. So the other misconception is that it's newcomers. You know, if you're building a new home, somebody's coming from elsewhere to buy it, when in reality, the majority of people buy within the same community. So if you're upsizing or if you're downsizing, you are a current ratepayer, and sure love you. You stuck in the front.
Yeah, that's embarrassing.
So the misconception that it is only outsiders or non-ratepayers who are paying this is false. So you have somebody who's been paying into the system all along, and they're buying the property, and now they're going to pay for that addition. So those are all considerations that need to be taken into account. Finally, this form of financing is, because of the nature of real estate development and the ebbs and flows of real estate development, is not as consistent. So something like a bond or some other form of financing, it might be a better approach. And finally, no matter what the decision is today or in the future, please keep in mind that the development process is long, the financing process is long. So any projects that are currently out there, they've been financed based on the current fees, and deals are in the works right now based on those costs. So just keep that in mind as you look at any kind of implementation. And then finally, a quick question was on those base inputs. The last time that I've been just curious as to the last time that those like the gallons per day, the maximum gallons per day, when those were last assessed, and what the typical usage is now. Is there any difference with, was it a year ago? Was it 5 years ago, 10 years ago? Because that will obviously affect the rates that are being considered. Finally, again, any questions that come up for you, please feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to pull together any kind of group that might be needed to assess the situation. Thanks for your time.
All right, thank you, John. Next on the list, we have, I guess it's, Aaron Lange. I'll defer to the gentleman that signed it up for me. Thank you. Okay, all right, Bill Rose. Okay.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Last time I was here talking about this issue, I did not wear glasses. So things do change.
There's a camera right behind you, but if you just will step to the side,
See.
just so you know, just let you know.
I might need to hold this for Hey, my name is Mel Rhodes. I'm at 412 North Marshall Street, Winston-Salem. I'm the principal planner for Arden Homes. We're a longstanding local developer of homes and commercial uses in the Triad. I work as the principal planner, looking at demographics, looking at design, looking at implementation, execution, all of the above. I'm glad to be here today, be able to talk about this. I've spoken with you before on some of these issues. I'm going to read a letter that I've got to submit, and maybe we'll have some more conversations about this. On behalf of Arden Homes, I thank you for the opportunity to provide comments on the proposed system development fees enabled by the state legislation. I first spoke about the impact of these fees at the public hearing on May 14th, 2018. I also provided a letter to Ms. Driver on May 21st, 2018, offering an alternative, which could have resulted in lower fees borne by the development community in this market. I'm happy to be providing comments on these modifications and from the 2023 Raftalis memorandum. Arden Homes and our affiliated companies have been involved in the development industry in Winston-Salem area for more than 4 decades. We've built about 100 and some homes a year, and have built or redeveloped more than 2,000 homes over our time in commercial buildings throughout that period. We're very concerned about this proposed fee adjustment. In 2018, we expressed concerns about the far-reaching effects of these fees, and seeing the newly revised fee estimates heightens our concerns. As a reminder, our concerns revolve around how these fees, in part, will act to de-incentivize the kind of development needed in our community and increase the cost of construction beyond market compatible levels. The city identified in the 2018 study on housing that workforce affordable multifamily missing middle housing types are all needed. An increase in fees, particularly as represented and under consideration today will have negative impacts on this type of housing in our community, and it'll further exacerbate our affordability crisis many are experiencing as these costs just get passed on to the consumer. To be clear, I don't have a problem with methodology. Methodology is pretty simple, pretty good. It's pretty easy to understand. But what we do have a problem with is the data used in the methodology. And it's the same problem that we had in 2018. For example, household size. We've known for years that household size in the Winston-Salem area is less than it was when we started thinking about stuff like this. It's actually 2.4 persons per household, not 3. And that's what's in the census. That's what's been in our studies. We've known this for years. We should not see 3 persons per household in this report right now. It's 2.4. And you know what? It's going down. It continues to go down. 1 and 2 person households make up the majority of the housing in our marketplace. Another point of concern in this analysis is the peaking factor. My opinion is that a lower peaking factor should be used to determine this ERU. You know, the right sizing, that's what we're doing here. We're right sizing fees, and we need to be right sizing our fees off of good data. And a peaking factor generated from years and years and years ago on new development with lower households and less volume may be warranted. You should study whether this is accurate. I asked for it before, I'm asking for it again. You know, for new construction that we do new construction. And to be penalized with an inflow and infiltration rate that we haven't produced is not necessarily the right way to go forward. I suggest you use a less one. I suggest you may go as far as not having one at all. Because we're inspected, our stuff is warranted for a period of time. It's new stuff. You shouldn't be having these kind of problems. Finally, the sewer unit cost for capacity that we're using. You know, I don't know when I did the review why that cost increased so dramatically. Did we miss something in the first analysis? What is driving that to go higher than what inflation produced? You know, inflation over the last 5 years is about 21%. That yields a lower number than what we see up there. So I just don't understand it. There was no rationale. There's no justification for it in the memo. Certainly, if you're going to put it in a fee, we need to know what it means. Also, as John mentioned, I'm getting away from reading this, which is trouble. As John mentioned, as you go up in density and as you go up in type, the water usage is different than it is for a larger single family home, which is the minority in what is built today. And so your scaling factor, which he mentioned as linear, which means as you grow, it grows equally. It is not an appropriate way to deal with larger multifamily or larger developments because they use less water. And so in your capacity analysis that you have, using the same number as you did before, looking back into the data, that's a number that dates from an older design manual. It needs to be explored and updated. So at the end of my letter, I have for you, let's see. At the end of my letter, I have a proposal, and I'd like to leave you with that proposal that generates a lower, more appropriate fee for doing what you need to do, which is to plan ahead. Now, if you had a bunch of projects out there that you needed money for, that you could actually go and get a bond for, you could give a budget and then you know what you got to work towards. But right now we're establishing a fee. And so I suggest in this fee, and I gave you a table at the back of my letter, that we look at those key factors going into the equation. 1, household size, 2, water usage, inflow and infiltration rate, and you got to study hard this peaking factor because looking at peak demand to determine annual volume is probably not the way to go. That's what's mentioned in the manual on sizing for meters. I would encourage all of you to do that as part of this exercise. So maybe do the letter. Thank you. Okay, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Well, if you want to give me the letter, then I'll send it out to the commission.
All right, so the next person we have on our list is Ron Frazier. Forster.
Thank you. John covered all the points that I had, Greg. John Lowry.
Sure you don't want to talk to him?
No. He did a great job.
That's fine. That's fine. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. Certainly do. There are no more comments? Yes. Yeah, we'll sign in. So, all right, good. Well, we appreciate that. And certainly, well, first of all, appreciate you spending the time to look at what we put together. Because obviously we want opinions from the public and persons that are out there actually doing the everyday work and make sure we're on the same track about being on the same page about what you're doing and what we're trying to provide for you guys. So we certainly appreciate your comments and we'll take those comments into consideration as we move forward. There are no other comments at this point. Let's move to the next item on our agenda.
And we're closing the public.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I forgot. So at this point, that being said, I will close the public hearing for the system development phase.
Did you notice?
Thank you all again.
Thank you.
Welcome to stay.
Yeah. I'm getting into budget stuff, so you can see.
That's good. All right, we good.
All right, let me pull it back up. Real quick. And they left before I had the last slide, but I think this is fine. This is just for, we obviously, staff and Raftellus will look into the comments that they made and put together a response to send to the commission. Based on some questions that they had, and then some of our recommendations. I did, and you may need to know some of that before we get to a point where we can bring you back something in June.
Yeah.
And maybe that's where I wanted to get a feel for where the commission right now, do we need to have a separate meeting before June, or is there kind of a census on?
So
We need to bring back.
Certainly, I'll open just open the floor to other commission members. What do you think? That might be point on.
Well, the letter that Mel Rose left, I'd be interested to see, and I'd be also interested to see what Will may have to say about that too, because he had some questions on your methodology, so.
Okay. Comments, commissioners?
Can we wait till the June meeting? Is that pushing it too far? Or would we have to call special meeting?
So one thing that I'm not quite sure about, Marilyn, you may have to ask. So we adopted the fees 5 years ago in June of 2018. So if we don't do anything in June and our current fees just kind of keep moving until we do something, with that, do we need to have some kind of adoption or some kind of, we need to be approving some fee in June. And if that's the case, we might need to have a special meeting.
Yeah, so
we need to update the SDFP analysis at least every 5 years. It's the analysis specific.
It doesn't say the fees. It doesn't say that we need to change, like we need to adopt the fees either as is or changed.
The literal language is the analysis, but I would think that the fee would have to be adopted pretty soon.
Okay.
Therewith, so, yeah.
So if no other comments from other commission members, I mean, I agree. I think it'd be great to have some feedback on what he provided from Raftellus, and so that we can kind of say yes, no, well, that's great points. You know, we need to kind of tweak this thing, because I want them to feel like, and I think we all want to make sure we heard what they've said and vetted through whatever that was to make sure, you know, we are on the right track. And if not, you know, certainly we need to be able to respond to them in a manner of how we move forward. But I would like to keep this thing on track, on schedule. So do we know for sure, can we hold this to June, or do we need to have something before then?
Why don't we do this? Since let's do this. Let me,
Okay, you're going to
yeah, let me check with Marilena. And if we need to bring something back in June, we'll schedule a special meeting. If we don't need to technically have anything adopted in June, then we'll discuss it again at the June meeting and put it on the agenda for July.
So because the bottom line is we do need feedback. We want to have some feedback on what was said.
Right, and we'll just adjust depending on what legal requirements we have to follow.
Okay, I'll look into it.
Yeah.
Make it work.
Right,
Yeah. Okay.
Very much.
Okay. Next on the agenda is our budget. So we'll get into the solid waste and water and wastewater budget overview for FY24. But before we jump into 24, I just wanted to go over real quickly our current budget. So for FY23, and this slide is our budgeted expenditures. For water and sewer, budget expenditures were $103.4 million. The majority of that cost, around $44.5 million, is for debt service, followed by our supplies and services. And then personnel expenditures. On the solid waste side, overall expenditures were budgeted at 12.5 million. Majority of that is for supplies and services at around 6.7 million, and then personnel, and then the debt service on the solid waste side is less than the supplies and services and personnel. It's at 1.9 million. And then the budgeted revenue for FY23 for water and sewer is 128 million, and you can see the breakdown between the water charges and the sewer charges, and then of course other type charges such as system development fees, industrial rate charges. And then on the solid waste side, the budgeted revenue was at 13.6 million, and overall the largest piece comes from the tipping fees at 11.7 million. Okay.
So if I could go back, so those slides are budgeted.
Yes.
So budget, forecast, actual, I mean, are we on forecast to where this budget is looking like we're pretty close?
Pretty close. So we haven't, it's probably been a couple of months since we normally show you those budgeted, the actuals versus budgeted. And I know we didn't last month because we had a full agenda, and probably it's been March since we last did. Do you know off the top? I know our revenues are doing well.
Yes, revenues are up, are outpacing budget amounts, and our actuals are actually tracking pretty true to what we budgeted last year. Period 12 will dictate.
So tell them what period 12 is.
Period 12 is June. So a lot of stuff is reconciled in June, so we know, and we try to factor in any analysis that we do. That it's going to be costs are going to be escalated, or at the actuals will accrue faster. So overall, last time we checked, we're tracking pretty well to be under budget this year
For expenditures.
for expenditures. Yes.
And then Jan, on the solid waste side, do you want to add to that?
In our case, my foot went to sleep while I was sick. Sorry. In our case, revenues are actually trending under budget. Tonnage has been down a little bit lower this year than we had budgeted. So we're a little bit under. I don't know the exact number. You don't remember, do you?
No, and with you, it's the accruals at the end of the year dictate a lot of that.
On the expense side, yeah,
Yep.
we're under budget on expenses, which is good news, but there are closure accrual yet to hit. So we can report on that in detail next month.
In June. Yep.
But off the top of your head, revenues are exceeding expenses. Is that correct?
For water and sewer.
On the water and sewer side,
How about on your side?
they are not.
They are not.
They are under.
Under budget, but still covering expenses, I guess.
They are covered.
Yeah, that's my question.
Expenses are also under budget.
What's coming in and going out?
Yes, yes, as of today.
Yeah.
As of today.
That's just because economic activity is probably a little down.
You know, it's hard to know, but I think it is that. Maybe there's talk about a recession again, that sort of thing might be affecting it. But tonnage can also leave our service area and go to other landfills, so it's hard to know.
I've seen the bulky item pickup in my neighborhood.
Yeah.
Might have some stuff on the way.
Right. And unfortunately, that's a small segment of what we do, but
I do want to contextualize the water sewer side a little bit about the actuals this year. In terms of forecasting, we have had to make sure that we're managing our budgets, and we wouldn't be in the situation we're currently in had it not been for the vacancies that we've seen. So in many ways, the vacancies are subsidizing the operations because we have had escalated costs in operations. As you are very well aware, the chemical situation has been incredibly detrimental to our budget this year.
So Ricky, let me kind of clarify that in my mind. You're saying that because we are paying less salaries, our expenses are down, even though we're having to pay overtime in order to pick up, that the overtime is still not rising.
To the point where it's the same as the STE. Yes, that's correct. So overtime has gone up and it's trending up from previous fiscal years. But overall, we're in the financial position that we're in because of the vacancy situation, or our vacancies, subsidizing in many ways the operations budget. So full disclosure.
and that's true on our side as well. With the inflation rates we've seen this year.
This is kind of a crazy question. The vacancies that we have are the vacancies that we need to have?
No. And because where we're at now is that our level of service is lower than what it needs to be. I mean, we just literally cannot do what we're doing as best as we can. But we just know that the level of service is just not as good as it could be and should be, because we just don't have the manpower to do it.
And that manpower is the 85 versus the 75. I guess it's.
Yeah, we always carry some vacancies. I mean, we always have, and we have turnover in certain positions more frequently, but it's never, to my knowledge, been this high. And, you know, that we're struggling to make sure that we have enough people to operate the landfill, our multiple our 2 landfills and the yard waste facilities. And so, you know, and we can only let people work so much overtime.
Sure,
I mean, there's labor laws, so it's like, and so when we're we're just doing the best we can.
It's just a thought.
Yeah. But no, I totally, I totally understand the question.
Okay, so moving on to next year's budget, we talked about the capital improvements budget last month in detail, but we wanted to at least show you the summary table of the budget, requested appropriations. That's actually not the solid waste CIP. That's.
Do we have it reversed?
See the 69 million?
That is right, the number at the bottom.
Oh, okay.
It's actually water, sewer, so, maybe it's the next one.
No, well, your table, I think it's probably just a typo.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Yeah, the table's right, just that part at the bottom, yeah.
Yeah, gotcha. I just looked at those bottom numbers.
That's big bad.
What happened there? So our budgeted, the request for appropriations next year is 910,000. So it's the second column of figures from the left. And the 910,000 is spread over the first 3 projects: that homes front entrance improvements, access road construction on Evo property, and pavement replacement. The period is on the far right corner, lower right corner, 37,845,000. Questions on that? Operating budget is next. So that's the only thing we had on CIP. The expenses that we're requesting in the operating budget total $13,318,110. That's about a 6% increase over the previous year. The first column is the current year adopted budget that you just saw in the pie charts that Courtney showed you. So personnel is increasing to $3,083,320. It's an 8.3% increase. Supplies and services, just over 8 million, 8.16 million. That's a 5.6% increase. Debt service is bond payments. That's essentially the same as the current year, slight decrease there. And NCMLC is equipment replacement leasing payments. So that's budgeted at $1,257,610, 8.9% increase there. So just a few highlights on the next slide of what's driving those expenses. Personnel is driven by a 6% average increase in our salaries built into the budget. Benefits and overtime are also increasing accordingly in personnel. Supplies and services increasing 5.6%. That's mostly in contracted services, that CPI escalator that we mentioned, closure accruals, the money that we put aside to close the landfill, and interdepartmental other city departmental charges. Those increases would actually be more than 5.6%, but is partially offset by the removal of our county recycling contract. That's been transitioned back over to Forsyth County, so it's no longer in our budget. Debt service increases almost 5%, mostly driven by equipment replacements, the 3 pieces that you see listed there, fairly expensive items to replace, and they're driving most of that 5% increase there. So I think that's it on expenses, unless there's other questions about that. As we said in the budget meeting, expenses are subject to change. Budget office is making adjustments, especially with those interdepartmental charges, I think. So you'll see final numbers at some point in the future when the manager recommends a budget. On the revenue side, total proposed revenues are 13,546,620, about almost a 1% decrease over the current year's numbers. The largest component of that is the tip fee revenue, and that's increasing about 0.6%. Intergovernmental revenues, that's money from the state of North Carolina to run some of our programs. That's about the only component we see increasing recently. That's been trending up, so that's going up about 8%. Resource recovery is money we get from the sale of landfill gas and scrap metal recyclables. That's increasing just under 1%. And then transfers in are going down with that Forsyth County reimbursement money being taken out of the budget. So highlights there, slight increase in tip fee revenue, as I mentioned. Tonnage is trending downward, but we are recommending a $1 per ton increase. So therefore, a very, very slight increase in tip fee revenue overall. Transfers in reduced because that contract has been transitioned to the county, as we mentioned. Intergovernmental revenue from the state is from the scrap tire and disposal tax distributions that we get from the state. So that's been trending up. So based on our cost of service study that we conducted based on FY22 data, we are recommending a $1 per ton increase in what was the discount rate at Haynes Landfill. That currently is $33, would go to $34. So that would effectively eliminate what has been the discount rate at Haynes. Everything would come in at $36 per ton to the customer, $34 to us. And we're also recommending a $1 per ton increase in the yard waste disposal rate or management rate at the 2 yard waste sites. That's largely driven by those contract increases with CPI escalators. So we're seeing inflation continue, and we mentioned the tonnage trending down and expenses trending up. So certainly it's going to be an interesting year, and we'll watch our financials very closely in the coming year. I think finally we had the comparison of solid waste disposal rates. These are regional publicly owned facilities, the top section being landfills such as ours. And you can see we're really at the low end of the range at $36 per ton, very competitive rate. And you can also see that transfer facilities typically have a higher cost per ton for their customers. These are cities that chose to close their landfill and no longer have their own facility. They're transferring it out to a private landfill.
Jan, what does North Carolina do with that $2 per ton tax?
A large piece of it, I think 80% goes to, maybe not 80, but over 50 goes to take care of inactive sites like old abandoned landfills in the Superfund branch of government. About 30% comes back to local government on a per capita basis. So we get some of it back. That's that intergovernmental revenue that you saw.
Your 85 vacancies, that includes solid waste and everything. How many of these are just Jan's?
In number wise, it's not that big. It may be 5 or 6, but it's in operator level positions. Do you know the exact number?
I want to say it was 5.
Yeah, but they're operators in this, so they're the frontline people that we really need to run the sites.
And you've got, solid waste has about 40 employees.
39.
Yeah,
Plus temps, temporarily.
So 5. I mean, yes.
It's in places where it really hurts. Right.
So at our last meeting, Aaron was still trying to find out about the salary increase, wage merit pay. Is that, have we determined what that is?
Dan had it on there, is that 6% that she showed you earlier?
It's still 6.
So that is.
That's what we're looking at, it's an average.
Okay. So we're not guessing it's what you think it is.
That should be the number that's going forward, that the manager's gonna present.
The only thing that's not in those numbers is if the council approves the one-time payment to employees. The council is discussing, or budget office and the manager's office is discussing with the council a one-time payment to help with inflation for employees that would be paid out in July. And since those numbers has not been finalized, that is not in what we're presenting. It will go up if it gets approved.
So how do we account for that after we pass this on?
So basically, the commission recommends approval of the budget, but the council is the one that actually adopts the budget. So if they add it in, it'll just get added in, and it'll be overall adopted within the city's overall budget in June.
Do we have a ballpark figure on how much that could be?
Probably it depends. It depends on which fund. The last number I saw was around 800,000 for salary adjustments, which accounted for, I think, 3% of the base, and also the one-time payout. So that's a ballpark figure.
What do we think the one-time payout is going to be for?
It's looking around 2,000. And I think there's still a little bit of debate on where that break point is in the salary structure. If you break it at 100,000 and everybody under 100,000 receives 2,000, everybody above 100,000 receives 1,000, or if you break it at call it assistant director and above. I think there's a little bit of debate still going on there, but I think it's looking like probably the $100,000 number. Mike, is that?
That's what my understanding as of now, yes.
And since Mike Kavista's here, I want to make sure that we utilize this time well.
We're glad to be here too.
Secondly, you were hiding back there. I'd almost forgotten about you. There was a thank you, Barry. There was a question that I'd had from a previous meeting. I haven't got an answer from, but Mike, I know that you would have it. When we were talking about some of the benefit cost increases, one of the questions that came up was about workers' comp. And I'm just wondering, how does the city allocate workers' comp for utilities? Is it based on classification code of workers? How do you?
That's a great question, Mr. Parker, and I do not know the answer to that. We'll have to get with the finance department and work through the methodology with that and get some information back to you all. Obviously, after the budget is adopted, but we could certainly tell you how that is calculated.
So does this mean I'll get to see you at another meeting in the future?
We'll send either Janice or Scott, someone that can actually answer that.
Yeah, because I know y'all were going to get back and we were going to go over the indirect cost allocation too and bring that information up at a future meeting as well.
Yeah, Scott is planning on coming back after budget season to go over that. Yeah.
So the other piece of this, so the recycling is not a bad thing to lose.
It's not a what?
It's not a bad thing to lose.
No, and the programs are not going away. They're just not funneled through our budget.
Yeah, okay.
So we don't have the administrative burden.
Right, because they were reimbursing us, but it was more of a pass through.
Yeah, okay.
So, yeah, we haven't let that go.
Yeah. That's what I was saying.
All right on. So presented to you today, I'll go a little bit slower than I did last time because last time I just burned through it. So presented to you today, here's the CIP that was presented several weeks ago. Stover did an excellent job presenting that. Budgeted this year $69,500 or $69,500,000. The big one there was the $40 million for the lagoons and the wastewater treatment plant. So total appropriations within the planning window about $268 million, $0.5 million. All right, this is the total budget request presented to you in stacked form and itemized form. Again, to piggyback off what Jan said, these numbers are presented with an asterisk beside of it until the city manager actually presents the proposed budget or the recommended budget, and the city council adopts as of July 1. Personnel, as of right now, we're looking at about a 6.79% increase there. Supplies and services going up almost 12%. Operating capital, no change there. NCMLC equipment payments budgeted at about 9.17% increase. Debt service is actually going down on the principal and interest payments as well as the state loans, going down 1.28%, and transfers out are going up 4.06%.
Ricky, just for some of the newer members of the council, and maybe for some of the others who want a refresher, the North Carolina Municipal Leasing Corporation payments. Tell us about that.
Okay, I'll do my best in lieu of Kelly not being here So there is a LLC that the city, it's actually a nonprofit, I think, that the city utilizes for the amortization of our long-term obligation, or it's special obligation bonds that are that help finance the equipment purchases over the course of 5 years. And so we participate in that. That helps the city purchase large pieces of equipment and small pieces of equipment, and they assess an interest to us up until an interest payment to us in which we pay. Up until a couple of years ago, we actually were the only ones, the enterprise funds were the only ones who actually paid that interest. But now that interest is assumed all across the city. So it's, equitable across the city. And so that's how we work with that corporation to be able to finance pieces of equipment.
So Calvin, that would be like if we went out and bought a new truck, it would go through this.
Yeah.
How do we make the decision to use them as opposed to going to PAYGO?
That's an excellent question. It's just the way in which we've done business over in the city for pretty long time, since the 80s and 90s.
But if we come up with a piece of equipment, we've got PAYGO funds available, and we've got this, is there some reason we need to use them? Is there some relationship with them that causes us to want to use them?
So,
I think here recently, Jan and Kelly, and Kelly, if she's on the call,
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, yeah.
So okay. you do have the option to use PAYGO. Certainly, I think it's been a balancing act between the debt payments and the revenues and the expenditures in the fund, and how much can we really afford to PAYGO versus paying that payment over the 5-year period, if that makes sense. It's more recently, I know like this year, Ricky and I talked about whether to look at PAYGO, but with the way the budget was and the way that like our current debt levels, for example, we just decided that it needed to be financed over 5 years.
Kelly, while you're speaking, in the PAYGO, is there some maintenance of a certain level we want to maintain with that to always have a reserve? Is there some level that you want to keep it at?
You mean level of cash and fund balance
reserve
for the utility fund? Yes, there is a target cash reserve. We want to have 1 year's worth of operating and debt expenditures.
Explains that. Yeah. All right, thank you very much.
I can also address the question on workers' comp and how that's calculated if you'd like.
Sure.
The workers' comp fund, so we look at the fund as a whole and what we expect as far as revenues and expenditures, and things have been trending up the last few years. And we also have a target cash balance that we need to maintain in that fund as well, which factors into to how much we need to bring into the fund from all the city departments. So what we do is we determine what percentage needs to be charged on each individual salary all across the city to bring in the amount of revenues that are needed to cover the expenditures in the fund.
So
all salaries are charged. It's just part of the benefits rate. So the larger departments do pay more, but that's just because you have more employees, for example.
So it's not based upon their job classifications, it's just based on their salaries?
That's right. Everyone just pays a flat rate for workers' comp.
A flat rate per employee?
Right. It's a percentage per employee salary.
A percentage per employee. So someone at a higher risk job classification, like a machine operator, is going to be at the same rate as somebody who's in administration, which would have a pretty low risk?
I mean, it could be. I mean, it very well could be, but we haven't been able to look at positions that way across the city for budgeting purposes. That would be a very time-consuming and complex exercise. And so the rate has been fairly reasonable over the years, and so we haven't taken a different look at the way that we're calculating that. Part of the reason it's going up so much this year is because it's not necessarily that it's going up like budget to budget. It's not going up as much as it looks like. It's just that for FY23 we actually under budgeted it, so the increase looks a lot larger.
Okay, interesting.
If you have any follow-up questions on that, feel free to email those to me and I'll definitely get back to you.
Thanks, Kelly.
Thank you, Kelly. And I misspoke. Oh, sorry. I misspoke earlier. It is not special obligation bonds. It's limited obligation bonds. So for NCM.
Oh, you're talking about equipment financing?
Yes.
Yes. So some of it is limited obligation bonds for the large projects, but for most of the equipment, it's just a 5-year, what they call an installment financing.
Okay.
So it's just almost like a personal auto loan.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
All right, and some of the highlights associated with this budget request. The personnel cost increase about 6.79, almost 6.8%. That includes the 6% average salary increase, as well as the benefits and also overtime. Supplies and services increase about 11.8%. Some of the key highlights here, and this is key, chemicals about $1.2 million going up, contracts going up about $500,000. Electricity also about $500,000. The debt service actually decreases this year. I don't know if you remember from the CIP presentation, but this year it's going down in subsequent year, or this year as in FY24, it's going down in subsequent years, it's going up. So that factors in equipment replacement for the factoring of 21 pieces of equipment through NCMLC, as well as bond payments going down about $900,000. So this slide was presented a few weeks ago at the Finance Committee meeting. It contextualizes our request for the supplies and services. As you can see, about 32% of the overall requests are actually associated with chemicals, in which we've tried to prepare the narrative over the last several months to let y'all know that the cost increase associated with chemicals are a huge driver on our operations, the electricity as well. Probably the two of the largest buckets in utilities. About 63% we've characterized as inflationary, which accounts for about $2.4 million, and about $200,000, 5%, anything new associated with our request, new or enhanced.
So Ricky, as I think about inflation, because I do like this slide, so you grabbed chemicals and you took that out of the mix for when you got that inflation number. That was based on everything outside of chemicals.
Yes, because there's supply chain that's baked into that and several other factors that didn't feel comfortable presenting that as inflationary. Also, when you itemize $1.2 million, it really,
I mean, it jumps out. So it's really, it's the purple is increased cost due to inflation outside of chemicals.
Correct. Yes.
And then chemicals.
Is inflation too, but it's just chemicals.
Yeah.
Right.
I think I've mentioned that if we need to do a little bit more information when we put out the blurb, that something like this, I think really shines a light. Now, granted, it's not our whole budget, but it gives people a perspective that 95% of this is due to inflation.
Right.
All of our chemicals are domestically sourced.
Hey, Bill, you on the call?
I am. Yes, they are. We have caustic traditionally has been imported from overseas, but we have a clause in our specs that requires it to be domestically produced. And to add to one other comment to Ricky's presentation is I think the good news or the silver lining is right now, and Darren Redfield can speak to this as well. We seem to see a lot of our suppliers are renewing at their current cost. They're not increasing costs. So that tells me that the markets for the moment have somewhat stabilized.
Bill, you said something about the caustic chemicals, that there is something in the language where it has to be produced domestically.
That's correct. Caustic, China puts out a lot of caustic product in order to ensure the quality of the product. to meet our standards, we've required that it be produced domestically.
So that's a quality issue.
Correct.
You mentioned energy. I don't think the supply chain thing's gonna get fixed anytime soon. So the energy piece, is that just cost, transportation and fuel and oil?
Mainly electricity and natural gas are kind of the two big buckets there. I don't know if you've seen in the news, but Piedmont Natural goes down a little bit, Duke Energy goes up a little bit, and they're basically the same company. So it's kind of interesting, and we try to do our best to be good stewards of those two particular line items. It's just the cost of doing business, and those consequently for water and sewer. On the plant side, we see those are two of our biggest cost centers.
So what are the experts saying of what's going to happen with that energy line? Is it going to get better? Is it going to get worse, or is it stabilizing?
So for electricity, we know that Duke Energy electricity is going up next year, and we do know that I think the percentage that I saw, and don't quote me on this, about 14%. And so we've adjusted our budget to also kind of reflect that. And we know that Piedmont Natural said that they're going to either hold their rates steady or decrease, but our usage, it just depends on what our operations looks like. And so we've done our best to optimize. Bill and his team have done a great job to optimize the plants with our SCADA systems and trying to get that energy usage as efficiently as we can. But it's still a cost that we have to bear every single year. Yeah.
So, okay, got it.
Is that, obviously electricity, is that due to buildings inefficient insulation?
So that was rate driven. So the way in which it was characterized to us was that it was rate driven by who we purchase our electricity from.
Have you looked at solar or anything like that to help maybe mitigate some of that?
We have the gas to electricity conversion project out at Muddy Creek that we do utilize. It is currently down. There's a good chance that an item could be coming to you in the future to deal with that.
I do think, this is my personal opinion, the cost of Duke Power providing electricity to the masses, including us, is going to go up. It's going to keep going up because of some of the transitioning that we're decided we needed to do. And it's going to cost more to provide the electricity that we need to function. So that's why I asked the question. I don't think it's going to get any better.
Yeah, solar really has limited applicability for us because of our loads to run our equipment are so high that we have to rely on the main grid. But I think it's one of those situations where you got to take all your toolkits and alternate energies into effect and make up the loads that don't fall into that category.
Sure. Very good.
And so today we're presenting to you, and what Will's about to talk about in a minute is a rate model or a rate presentation that will hopefully increase our budgeted revenues to about $137 million from our projected end of year about $130 million. As you can see, water charges are going up, sewer charges are going up, system development fees. We tamp those down, those expectations down just due to the macroeconomic environment. And also we've seen a slowdown in terms of how much revenue we're generating so far this fiscal year. Industrial waste surcharge steady there, and everything else basically steady to that $137 million, almost $138 million effect.
And so that system development fees, that's projected to be flat this year.
But the
as far as the rate goes, not the
yes, and so
the volume's going down.
So that's what is in we took into consideration here. This actually is kind of offsetting. The idea. We have to run these scenarios based on best case guess on whatever your decisions make. So right now, even with the current environment, we're projecting a decrease, even with a potential rate increase there.
So, Ricky, question.
sir.
What is the projected budget, operating budget? It's several screens back, I know, but I can't remember the number. We're looking at 137, almost 138 for the recommended revenue. What's the operating budget?
So operating budget total, total expenditures at about, yeah, about $108 million, give or take a few, about 4.65% increase. But we do know that this is going to go up based on some of the assumptions that have been conveyed to us from the budget office. It just depends on what how city council navigates the next few weeks.
Right.
The city manager's proposed budget.
Well, you're not talking about $30 million though, are you?
No.
Right now, some pay-go, and Kelly can speak more to that, but obviously we have to have some cash on hand to fund pay-go and things of that nature just to meet our reserve amounts.
So as of right now, with the numbers that we have plugged in, the contribution to fund, we're expecting to contribute about $30 million, about $29.7 million. I do know that much. That's currently within our pro forma. And that, you know, next year, contingent upon performance, we'll revisit. And that's the great thing about having a rate process that happens every year. We can kind of revisit on an annual basis. They're kind of correct or right size.
So the $30 million is all for pay-go? Is that what I just heard?
So that $30 million is what we're expecting to contribute to our fund. That is after our operate. If you take the net difference between our revenues and what our operating budget is, it's right. About $29.7 million.
Well, I thought maybe you'd divide that amongst the members. I didn't know.
No.
Thank you.
If Tom's finished, back to my question, I just want to get clarified because I thought it did, and then you said something that made it more questionable for me. So currently the system development fees are projected to be 3.5 million for this current year. In this upcoming year, you're budgeting 3 million. So and is that including, because one of the recommendations I saw that when we make a vote on the system development fees was to keep the system development fees, the rate increase flat for this coming budget year. So when you were looking at this 3.0 million, did you keep that rate flat or did you project an increase in the rate?
So for this exercise, a flat system development fee, but we tamped it down because of performance this year. I don't think that we're going to meet that $3.5 million.
Okay, so that's what I want to understand.
Yep.
So we're looking at it as if we're not going to increase it for the next year.
Yes, and so we're trying to be as conservative as we can, or kind of when we had those conversations, we're trying to be as conservative as we could be on the system development fee front. Give or take a few. It's all forecasting and it just based on the macroeconomic environment. So
if Will were to persuade us that we need to do it immediately, then that 3.0 million might be a little higher.
It could potentially be. We have seen a slowdown, anecdotal, and that's the reason why we budgeted the way we did
from that. Okay.
Not done with me yet. Round two. So this is going to be the rate option. Was here a few weeks ago to walk through a couple of rate options, and today we're just sort of honed in on this single option here, which is a 7% revenue increase in fiscal 24. That's divided 5% for water, roughly, and 9% for wastewater. For a 7% overall increase to achieve Ricky's budget.
And then, well, if I could say for the people who did not come to the finance committee meeting, when they say recommended, that was what came out of that finance committee meeting as a recommended option.
That's right. In terms of what this rate increase does, there's a couple of rate setting goals that this is gonna help us meet, that we've been working towards. The first one's going on behind the scenes a little bit. One thing we're trying to do kind of over a 3-year period, and this is year 2 of it here, is continue to transition our base charges to where our monthly base charge is half of our bi-monthly base charge. And then when we switch to billing everyone on a monthly basis, it'll be a really clean transition. The bi-monthly bills will just go to half and everybody will be on the same schedule. Based on the cost of service analysis, it does appear that sewer is still under recovering a little bit on revenue. So one of our goals is for water rates and revenues to pay for water and sewer to pay for sewer. So, that's contemplated here with the higher increase for sewer. It's a very expensive service, as we all well know. And then maintain fixed revenue stability. We've worked over the years to get good, strong fixed revenue stability. This essentially maintains where we are at about 20% fixed revenue recovery, which is a good place. So a couple of slides on customer impacts. The first one is just an average residential customer bill here. That's 10 CCF or 1,000 cubic feet over a bi-monthly billing period, about 500 cubic feet per month. And as you can see, this, we've got our proposed option over here. It's about a $7 increase, $6.80, 86 cents, and 7.3% increase on that average customer. So going from about $93.50 to $100 for a combined water sewer bill. This slide breaks down the customer impacts for various meter sizes. We've got a lot of different meters out across the system, and the way that these customers use water, and typically if you go down the list, you get kind of higher water users with those larger water meters. So the bi-monthly is pretty straightforward. Everyone right around kind of that 7% increase. You do see some a little lower there for the monthly meters that are the 5/8 or the 3/4 inch. There's just a handful of customers there, but that's that monthly transition we were talking about. Those are going to be, their base charges are held flat as the bi-monthlies are increased, so that's why their increase is a little bit lower. But in general, everyone kind of hovering right there around 6 to 7.5%.
Could you go back to the previous slide, Chip? So this is the bi-monthly bill increases. So for monthly, it'd be about $340 a month. Okay.
That's right. And there is that little nuance going on behind the scenes with the base charge transition. But that's correct. It's going to be in that $2 to $3 range.
So Gail, when you put out your press release, do you do it based on the average person has a bi-monthly bill, or do you do it based on
I believe
monthly?
we usually say the monthly amount it would be, just
So
for
the
people thinking
monthly-
about their monthly expenses.
Yeah,
That's
smart. It's how they think of it in their head. So it would be monthly would be $3.40 something.
Yeah.
One last slide here. Again, I think this is a really good one to show. You can see where we are at our current bill there. That would be our what's that? So 93.57. At our existing bill, there's our proposed bill by the gray arrow, and that's the $100.43. So as you can see, we maintain our position with this increase among our peers, and I suspect many of these are going to be raising their rates in the upcoming fiscal year as well. So
we know that Greensboro is going to have an 8.5% increase. So what's showing up there is their current rate. So it'll go up. I think what I've heard from Charlotte and Raleigh, they're around a 4% increase, and I don't know the other ones yet. So.
And that North Carolina median that you got at the bottom, is that all just municipalities, or is that private systems combined, everything?
I think that it's mostly the municipal and county systems. That's from the North Carolina, the UNC Environmental Finance Center. They have a big rate dashboard, and that's where we grab that. Lots of smaller systems, I think, pushing that one.
Push it higher, smaller systems, yeah.
How does Greensboro do it? They have the water supply we have.
Yeah, I think they might after this next one. We still might be a little bit ahead of them. But
Right.
you know, we were, if I remember, because I've been in the utility for about 15 years, we were arguably less than Greensboro, and then we ended up having some we had some steady increases over years and bumped ahead of them, and so, but we've always kind of been close to each other.
Right.
I will tell you too, Greensboro is planning on increasing their system development fees 11.4% for the next 5 years. So they're gonna do it gradually, but it will be roughly 11.5% each year.
What's the cumulative number on that?
I don't know. I think a little over $2,000.
I mean, percentage wise, I mean, because we were, what ours was 27% for the sewer.
Yeah, we're 2.7 for water and 27 for sewer, and that's to bring it up to the
Right, if we did that, but that would be for that 5-year period. So if they're doing 11% a year over a 5-year period.
Yeah.
Thank you, Matt.
I mean, keep moving.
Keep moving.
Keep moving. Okay, any other questions on the budget? Okay. So item number 3 on your agenda is approval of the meeting minutes from the April meeting. And then I'll turn it over to Mike Staver for the next 3.
All right, item 4, consideration of resolution authorizing execution of various agreements regarding proposed water and sanitary sewer improvements to be installed within various developments. There's 2 developments totaling $113,750 for water and $47,490 for sewer. Any questions on item 4? Item 5, consideration of a resolution awarding a contract for system-wide sewer rehabilitation phase 5. This project will support the collection system improvement program. Bids were scheduled to be received on April 11th, 2023, but fewer than 3 bids were offered. In accordance with North Carolina General Statute 143-129, the project was re-advertised. Again, only 1 bid was received on the new bid date of April 18th. KRG Utility was the low bid out of Kernersville. Their total bid amount was $4,372,728. KRG agreed to subcontract minimum 5.03% certified minority businesses and 5.15% certified women-owned businesses, which exceeded the goals established for the project of 5 and 5. It's recommended that a contract for system-wide sewer phase 5 be awarded to KRG, lowest responsible bidder, meeting specifications, and the total base bid amount of $4,372,728, and that $250,000 be available for contingency if needed. The engineer's estimate was $3,587,950. Any questions on item 5?
We get much feedback. It's almost like a motif sometimes where there just aren't that many bidders for a lot of jobs. Is it because it's like too big for some, too small for others? And
you know, it varies so much, but based on the type of project. As far as rehab goes, KRG has gotten every single rehab project we've gotten, and they're local and they do great work, and they do it for really good prices. So, you know, early on during the CSIP program, we were getting bids from people out of state, and I don't know if they're busy or if they just can't compete with those prices, but it does seem like last couple rehab projects we've bid out, there's been less competition.
So KRG has been the one we've been using from the beginning for this.
every project that we've been out, sewer rehab, so we've had 4 system-wide sewer projects, and we've done various other neighborhood projects, Sprague Street, Zion, various others. KRG's gotten every single one of them.
From that, so this total bid amount, 4.37 million, is that 250,000 on top of that?
Yes, sir, and that's only if it's needed.
So that is about $1 million more than what the engineer's estimate was. So if the engineer was estimating based upon previously using the same contractor for similar stuff, that's like 20+%.
Yeah, it was higher than expected, to be honest with you. And I think, we asked that question to KRG, and these system-wide projects, like, if you have a neighborhood project, it usually has a pretty defined project boundary. So they know exactly where they're going to be. These system-wide projects are spread all the way across the county. In fact, we had a map prepared for you all, and it didn't provide much value because there were so many locations across the county. So with the nature of the work being somewhat unknown, they know they're going to do pipe bursting and lining, that type of thing. They just don't know exactly where they're going to be doing it. We saw bid prices go up a little bit. Any other questions for item 5? All right, item 6, consideration of a resolution requesting MWB goals to be set below the 10% minimum goal for the hydrant replacement project. We are currently advertising a hydrant replacement contract like we've done before. I think this is probably the 4th iteration of that. In the past, this project's been advertised as a purchase with installation, as allowed by general statute under the predominance rule. Normally, MWB goals are not set on that type of project, but historically, there's been some appetite to try to get as much participation as possible. So with that being said, MWB staff is recommending MWB goals to be set at 1% MWB and 1% WBE, which is, I believe, consistent with what we done last time. Jakir, is that right?
That's correct.
Any questions on item 6? All right, we'll turn it over to Bill for item 7.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody.
Hey, Bill, hold on a second.
This is just a general question. When the engineer comes up with a cost estimate, do the bidders know that, what that number is? No. Okay.
Normally, we don't share that. The only times I believe that we have, and Chantel, you tell me if you do it differently now. I know we've had trouble with bids being, we keep way over and we're rejecting all bids and everything. Then finally we'll say, this is our budget for this project. See if you can get it closer to this range.
That's correct.
Yeah.
All right, thanks. Go ahead, Bill.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Item 7 is consideration of a resolution authorizing a purchase order for a medium-duty 4-wheel drive crew cab pickup with crane and utility body. The wastewater treatment division has a need to replace a 1996 Chevrolet pickup with about 58,000 miles on it. The acquired cost when it was purchased was $45,000, but it is accrued maintenance and repair costs of about $30,000. This truck is needed for the daily operations, mainly for the lift stations, but it is used on the plant sites as well. So after due advertisement on March 31st, we received one bid from Modern Chevrolet in the amount of $174,097, which is what staff is recommending the commission approve a purchase order for. This will be financed through the City of Winston-Salem's internal leasing program, and it was proposed in the fiscal 22-23 budget. Just as a side note, it was sent directly to 20 dealers, including 5 local dealers, and there are no known local minority women or MWBs that sell this equipment. So are there any questions regarding this item?
So this is an example of an item that would go to the North Carolina Municipal Leasing Court finance.
That's correct.
No, one of the city's internal leasing program.
Oh, yeah, you're saying that.
The city's internal leasing program.
Right. Okay.
So are we good with item 7?
Yes.
Okay. Item number 8 is consideration of a resolution awarding a contract to ASCO Power Services, Inc. to upgrade the programmable logical controllers and associated controls at the Northwest Raw Water Treatment Pump Station. The PLCs, as they're called, programmable logic controllers, and associated controls for the switchgear at the Northwest Raw Water Pump Station are original equipment that were procured and installed when the plant was commissioned in 2004. A lot of the PLCs and a lot of the controls associated with them are obsolete, and parts are becoming very hard to find. That was noted during a recent inspection that was done by ASCO that we have done on these on these MCCs periodically. So staff requested a quote from ASCO in the amount of $121,520 to upgrade the equipment and the PLCs to current standards. We recently did, about 2 years ago, we did this same project at the Swan finished water pump station up at the plant. Because these controls and programming are proprietary, it requires ASCO Power Services to access and control and modify the program. ASCO was approved by the commission as a sole source vendor in May of 2022. However, because this exceeds the amount that was approved up to $50,000, this request requires the commission's approval. So are there any questions regarding item number 8?
Nope, move on.
Okay, item number 9 is consideration of a resolution approving a purchase order for sole source vendors. So staff is requesting approval of purchase orders to vendors for equipment, supplies, and related repairs and maintenance for products used in utility operations. These products are only available through the authorized distributor or by the manufacturer of the product. And a complete list of vendors was available in Exhibit A following the resolution. So these purchase orders will cover the period from July 1, 2023 to June 30th, 2024, and will be awarded to each vendor as needed. And this is estimated annual spending is based on historical spending data and based on what staff believes our needs to be for these items. So they're based on the provisions of NCGS 143-129E, which provides that formal bid requirements do not apply to purchases or apparatus, supplies, materials, or equipment when performance or price competition for a product are not available. And either product is available from only one source of supply, or when standardization or compatibility is the overriding consideration. So are there any questions regarding item number 9?
So Bill, it's Chris. This previous item, number 8 for ASCO, was $50,000, and I see we're still going ahead with $50,000 to estimate annual spend. So that previous item really was something that we don't normally do.
That is correct. That project is out of the ordinary, and we don't anticipate the routine work that we have from ASCO to be above $50,000. That's why we brought that 121 to you, and that's how we handle all of these. If we see that it's more than what you approve, we will bring it back to the commission for approval.
Well, and as I was looking at in previous years, like in 2019, it was 4.1 million overall for the sole source for vendors. 2020 went up to 4.4, 21, 5.3, last year 6.3, but now it's stable. So do you feel like you've gotten a better understanding on our sole source needs? Because it seemed to be pretty stable this year compared to last.
Yes, staff and I went through the sole source list, and we called several vendors that we did not, that we haven't used and we did not think we would use, or that we thought did not belong on the list. But yeah, I think we have a pretty good handle on what our needs are and what vendors should be on that list.
And this is really stretching out here, but total estimated spend, how close do we actually get to that on an annual basis?
Well, it's variable. So to date, this fiscal year, with all the vendors that are on that list, we've spent about 7.5 million. Now, about 5.5 million of that is with census, and that's a large capital project that the commission has approved separately. So that the adjusted number without that capital project is about 2 million. But I would just ask that you keep in mind that these dollar figures are based on services that we feel we may need throughout the year in order to keep our operation going. In the expedite the process of getting like maintenance services or reactionary repairs done throughout the year.
Okay, that was very helpful.
The largest one I see here is Carolina Tractor and Equipment Company for $500,000. We must have somebody around one of our places all the time. I assume that doesn't include parts, does it, Bill? Jan?
We do see those trucks are out there almost every day.
Do you?
For various either PM or repairs.
Wow.
Yeah, we have a lot of large mobile equipment that they service, and we also they service a lot of our generators.
Right, more questions? All right, next item.
Item number 10 is consideration of a resolution authorizing execution of a second amendment to the water tower lease agreement with T-Mobile South LLC. So on March 18, 1995, the city manager executed a contract that was approved by the commission with Sprintcom, Inc., which is now T-Mobile. T-Mobile South LLC acquired Sprintcom. And they have existing equipment on the Old Town Tank located at 2770 at the Barrett Road in Winston-Salem, 27106. So T-Mobile South has requested to modify the existing agreement by expanding their footprint within our property to install a natural gas powered emergency generator. And they also wanted to extend the terms of the agreement. The current rent paid by T-Mobile was $2,290 a month. So the key terms of the amendment are it extends the contract for 2 additional 5-year terms to March 8th, 2033. It adds an additional $250 of rent per month with escalation to accommodate the space needed for the emergency generator. It provides a provision for T-Mobile South to pay costs for our tank maintenance engineer, excuse me, to perform inspections of the carrier's contractor work and provide a list of repairs and deficiencies that they need to address. It also incorporates additional indemnification language required under such contracts by our city attorney, and then T-Mobile has agreed to an assumption of liability of the terms of the original agreement with Sprintcom. So staff recommends approval of the second amendment and authorization for the utilities director where they're designated to negotiate additional terms as needed and execute the contract.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
We got the next 3. So, item 3 is a resolution approving the FY24 water and wastewater operations and capital improvement budgets and requesting adoption by the city council. We've gone over the slides. I would say that there are 2 pieces. So the operations and capital budget and rate recommendations have been approved by the finance committee in previous meetings. So this will be to recommend approval of the budget, or approving the budget and recommending that the city council approve it. And then the second piece to that is to actually approve the water and sewer rates that are shown in the attachment, and they become effective on July 1st, 2023. So as a reminder, the city council ultimately has the authority to approve the budget based on the recommendation of the utility commission. The utility commission has the authority to set the rates. So that's there's 2 pieces in this item. Similarly for item 12, it's a resolution to approve the FY24 solid waste operations and capital improvement budget. and recommends adoption by the city council. So the finance committee has reviewed the budget, recommends approval. It recommends that the city council also adopt said budget. And then the second piece of that is to approve the solid waste rates as shown on the attachments, and that they become effective on July 1st, 2023. Any questions about either of those two items?
Maybe a Mary Lane question. So if we use a consent agenda and these two items are in consent agenda, we don't need to separate out these budget and rate increases in separate. We can still do that through the entire consent agenda.
You can approve the entire agenda.
With that. Okay.
Okay.
Keep going.
Okay, and then the last item is item 13, and this is a resolution approving that Winston-Salem County Utilities join the Yak and PD Water Management Group. This group is comprised of several municipal and private entities that are interested in the long-term sustainability of the Yak and PD River Basin. It originally was formed in 2016 under an MOU, so a memorandum of understanding. And over the last 2 years, the group has been trying to pursue incorporating as a nonprofit. And so basically the membership had voted to incorporate as a 501c3. Staff requests approval that they join the newly formed 501c3. And the annual dues for FY24 will be $15,000. And this has been included in the FY24 operating budget. Of course, annual dues in subsequent years may be amended and of course are being included in future budget needs.
So, you know, I'm aware, I guess we have certain persons online. I just want to make sure I keep them on. I don't want to lose them in this process as we go move to our vote. Which the way everybody's still very good. So at this point, because I think it's probably worth, I don't know if we do it now, but maybe at some point talk about this Yak and water management group again for newer members, so they can kind of get a better history of how that's developed and what it used to be. And this is kind of a formal tie of us and them, but it's certainly something that's very valuable and is high on our radar and monitoring, monitoring water quality. So we can talk a little bit about that later, I think, for the newer members.
Who sits on that committee for us? Is it Bill?
It's Bill.
Yeah. So at this point, I would like to ask for, approval of these agenda items by consent.
Second.
Second. Call for a vote.
Commissioner Brown,
Approved.
Commissioner Eustache, Commissioner Griffin,
Yes.
Commissioner Hines,
Yes.
Commissioner Long,
Yes.
Commissioner McRae,
Approved.
Commissioner Parker,
Approved.
Commissioner Wilson,
Yes.
Commissioner Younger.
Yes.
Excellent. I guess based on all those approved, it's approved. That's approved. Thank you. We passed our time a little bit, but I think it's been a great discussion. And I appreciate everybody hanging in there with us as we kind of move forward with this. And well, I guess at this point, I will ask, are there any items for the good of the order that we need to discuss right quick? That not being said, I'd like to receive a motion for dismissal.
So moved. Thank
you.
Commissioner Brown,
Approved.
Commissioner Eustache, Commissioner Griffin,
Yes.
Commissioner Hines,
Yes.
Commissioner Long,
Approved.
Commissioner McRae,
Approved.
Commissioner Parker,
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson,
Yes.
Commissioner Younger. Sorry.
Yes.
That's unanimous approval. We're good. Thank you all.
Thank you.